Yo, what's up guys? So I've gotten this question a few times. Are there any $100 smartphones that I can use as a secondary phone? And some of these you can actually still use as a main phone as well too. But I know some of you guys are on Android and you might want to do a low investment into iOS just to use FaceTime or iMessage or something like that. So I also have an option for that too. But you'd be surprised. There are some phones that you can find for $100 and a lot of these are going to be on eBay. You can find them sometimes on Amazon, Swappa, places like that as well too. So definitely search around, but these definitely are going for $100. All right, so first up is the LG V60. This is a fantastic option. eBay has them on their site for $100, and I think this is probably the best deal. Even if you use this phone as a secondary device, you can also pair it with a dual screen case and get the true multitasking experience, which is really awesome. It's built like a tank. It's got aluminum frame, glass back, IP68 dust and water resistant. It's got a physical headphone jack and SD card support. Like I said, you also have that dual screen case as well too that you can buy. And it's just a beast as a secondary device or even a main device. This phone got the Android 13 update as well too, which I made a video about. It was very surprising. So this phone has a POLED display. It's HDR10 Plus at 6.8 inches. It's 1080p, 395 for the PPI, and it's a very good panel for what it is. And it's a Snapdragon 865 chip on here, and 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. Believe me, this device is still very, very fast. It's a very fast phone, and I have no issues with the overall speed of this device. It's a very snappy phone, and you also have really good gaming performance on here as well too. So like I said, just as a cheap gaming option, it's still a beast with this A65 chip. This phone also has, like I said, pretty good stereo speakers and the headphone jack with the quad DAC in it, which is kind of unique in 2023 because you don't have a lot of phones with headphone jacks, and not only that, but a quad DAC as well too. Under the display, fingerprint sensor is fine. You also have a pretty decent camera setup. It's a 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide, 0.3 depth sensor, shoots in 8K 30, 10 megapixel selfie, shoots in 4K 30. It still takes pretty good pictures in good lighting. So if you're outdoors, this takes really good pictures. In my opinion, still really good color signs, dynamic range. Only thing I wish is they put it like a dedicated telephoto lens on here, but other than that, it's a really good camera as well too. And not only that, but the battery life is fantastic on the V60. Excellent standby time and really good screen on time as well too. You can easily get day and a half of battery life out of here, and it also has wireless charging as well. Next is the Galaxy S10e. These are going for like 134, and this is a extremely impressive phone. I wish Samsung would remake this phone with this screen size because it's extremely comfortable to hold. One of my favorite phones of all time, definitely in my top 10. And it's got aluminum frame, glass back, IP68 dust and water resistant. Still a really nice dynamic AMOLED display. It's HDR10 Plus at 5.8 inches, so you can one hand this pretty easily. It's also 1080p 438 for the PPI. It got its last update with Android 12 when you're at 4.1. Now, I get the question, does everything work on here? Yes, everything still works. It actually still plays PUBG at HDR Extreme. So it's able to play that really well with the Snapdragon 855, and it's still a very fast phone. Micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. Easily makes for a great backup device. I took this to CES with me, I think the 2020, and yeah, it just goes really good with a big phone, and then you have a small phone, so it doesn't take up that much room in your pocket and stuff like that. So you do have a headphone jack, stereo speakers, which actually sound amazing for the size of this device. NFC fingerprint scanner is side mounted, it's physical. This phone is not getting security patches and stuff like that, so all I did was put some antivirus software on here, and it's been good to go. It's very safe still to use, so I don't have an issue with that personally. You just need to watch, make sure you don't download anything that's not on the Play Store. You also have a pretty decent camera on here. It's a 12 megapixel standard and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. It shoots in 4K 60 with a 10 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 60. And again, it takes some decent photos and good lighting. I think it still takes pretty good photos. Honestly, indoor lighting it could be a little bit better. You start to see its age a little bit, but other than that, it's still a pretty good phone for taking pictures with, honestly. You also have on here a 3,100 milliamp hour battery, wireless charging, and then you have reverse wireless charging on as well on here. The battery life is the only thing about this phone. You get around like 4 hours and 30 minutes of screen on time, which is definitely not a day, so you have to definitely charge this device. Now, for anybody who is on Android and you just kind of want to experience iOS, but you want it to be low investment, I would go with an iPhone SE, the 2020 edition. The reason I say that is because this phone also got iOS 17, and it is like $100 on eBay and Swap and places like that. You can find it very cheap, and it's just a good device as a secondary phone or just to experience FaceTime or iMessage or something like that. It is the older iPhone design. It's got the aluminum frame, IP67, dust and water resistant. What's funny is that the newest version of the SE still looks like this, which is hilarious. It also has a 4.7-inch display. It's in Retina IPS display, 625 nits peak brightness. It's 720p plus, 326 for the PPI. It's a decent display. It's nothing too special. Also, you have, like I said, the highlight with this is getting iOS 17. It has actually a very strong chip. The Apple A13 chip is still very powerful chip. It still plays PUBG at HDR Extreme. It still flies through iOS. It's actually pretty impressive, the chip on here. You also have 64 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM. And then you also have on here stereo speakers, which sound decent. Again, for its size, they're okay. What's really cool is a lot of people like the physical fingerprint scanner on here, and also using it as a home button. So if you're somebody that likes that, then that's there, right? You also have on here the camera. It's just one camera. It's a 12 megapixel standard. It shoots in 4K 60, and then a 7 megapixel selfie, shoots in 1080 30. The camera is decent. I think it actually takes some pretty decent stills, but there's no ultra wide, there's no telephoto, so it's kind of limited experience. And the front camera doesn't do 1080 60, so the camera situation, it's okay. It takes decent stills in my opinion. Battery life, this is another one. Since it's a small phone, battery life isn't going to be that great. 1821 milliamp hour battery. It does do wireless charging as well, which is pretty nice, but overall this is a phone you're going to have to charge to as well. Now, this is also another great option for anyone looking for a secondary phone with a great camera, or just in general. This phone is still really good. And it also got the Android 14 update recently, or it is getting it as well. So it's got the aluminum frame on here, aluminum back actually, IP67 dust and water resistant. It's got an OLED display. It's HDR, 6.3-inch display, 1080p, 415 for the PPI. Unfortunately, there's no high refresh rate, but it is what it is. You can find this phone easily for $100. So I was actually pretty surprised by that. So this phone, again, Snapdragon 765G on here, and the chip is okay. It's not a slow phone by any means. It games fairly decently, not as good as the older flagships, but it does a decent job with performance and running the stock version of Android. You get the Google experience as well too. You can use the Android 14 beta on it right now, actually, which is nice. 128 gigs of internal storage, 6 gigs of RAM is on board. Pretty good stereo speakers. It actually does have a headphone jack as well too, so that's very surprising. The fingerprint scanner is rear mounted on the back. So it's physical, it's on the back, so it works fine. This, I think, has the best camera on the list. It's got the classic, pixel camera experience on here, and it takes really good photos. A 12.2 megapixel standard, 16 megapixel ultra wide, shoots in 4K 60, 8 megapixel selfie cam, shoots in 1080 30, and it just takes some fantastic photos. Really good dynamic range, really good detail, good image processing. It's just an impressive camera. I think it takes just as good photos as like some of the latest flagships. So for $100 to get a top-notch camera, I think is a steal, right? And lastly is the Galaxy A14 5G. This phone, I got it for $100, and I was surprised. Again, it will be like my last option, but it is a new phone, so you can get it brand new, not used or refurbished, for $100, but it's gonna be locked to a carrier. I was surprised at how I didn't absolutely hate the phone, but like I said, I wouldn't choose this one over the rest of them unless you just wanted a new phone and you want, like, there's something about this phone that you like. Just check out my video, but in general, the phone was decent. It's a plasticky build, and just a plastic phone. It's $100. It's got a PLS display, LCD 90 hertz. I was surprised by that. The display was somewhat decent, but the color was off when you move the display. Like if you tilt the screen, the color would be off. And again, if you look at it head on, it is fine. It's running Android 13 One UI 5, the Core Edition, and it has the Exynos 1330 chip, which was again decent. It was able to play PUBG at somewhat okay settings. It's got micro SD card support and a headphone jack, surprisingly. So that's really good. And yeah, it's okay. It runs fine. I think the cameras on here were probably the worst. It's a 50 megapixel standard, 2 megapixel macro, 2 megapixel depth, 1080/30 on the front and back with a 13 megapixel selfie. I just wasn't impressed with the image quality of the A14. And again, it's $100 phone, but even in outdoor lighting, these older flagships pretty much smoke this phone in terms of color and detail and overall just quality. Um, the fingerprint scanner side mounted was decent. 5,000 milliamp battery, I think is a highlight. It does have pretty good battery life, so I was surprised by that. So it's an overall decent phone if you want something new, and it's somewhat decent. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.